Okay, reading from Canto 2, text number, you're gonna put it up there? Canto 2, chapter 3, text number 22. Okay. Have it? Okay, so maybe people, devotees can just try to repeat the words. Badhaite te nayane naranam lingani vishnor na nirikshato ye pado nranam tau druma janma bhajau kshetrani nanu varjato hariryo. Why don't you just use the Apple TV with your phone? Badhaite te nayena naranam lingani vishnu nani rakshato ye padarninam tau druma janma bhajo kshetrani nanu varjato hareyo. Badhaite te nayanam nayane naranam lingani vishnu nanirikshato ye pado niranam tau druma janma bhajo kshetrani nanu varjato hareyo. Badhaite te nayana naranam lingani vishnu nirikshayito ye pada nirnam tau druma janma bhajo kshetrani nanu varjato hareyo. Please repeat. Badhaite te naranam lingani vishnu nanirikshito ye pado nirnam tau druma janma bhajo kshetrani nanu varjate hareyo. Badhaite te naranam lingani vishnu narikshito ye pado nirnam tadhurma bhajo kshetrani nanu vrajato hareyo. Badhaite te nayane naranam lingani vishnu narikshito ye pado nirnam tadhurma bhajo kshetrani nanu vrajato hareyo. Badhaite te nayane naranam lingani vishnu narinirikshito ye pado nirnam tau druma bhajo kshetrani nanu vrajate hareyo. Mataji. Badhaite te nayane naranam Lingani Vishnu na nirikshito ye. Padabdhan vimabhrantan bhajao. Badhayate, like plums of a peacock. Te, those. Nayane, eyes. Naranam, of men. Lingani, forms. Vishnu, of the personality of Godhead. Na, does not. Nirikshataha, look upon. Ye, all such. Pado, legs. Nranam, of men. To, those. Druma Janma, being born of the tree. Bhajo, like that. Kshetrani, holy places. Na, never. Anuvrajataha, goes after. Hare, of the Lord. Yo, which. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Translation: the eyes which do not look at the symbol representation of the personality of Godhead Vishnu, His forms, names, quality, etc., are like those printed on the plumes that He said, plums, on the plumes of the peacock. And the legs which do not move to the holy places where the Lord is remembered are considered to be like tree trunks. Purport: especially for the householder devotees, the path of deity worship is strongly recommended. As far as possible, every householder, by the direction of the spiritual master, must install the deity of Vishnu, forms like Radha, Krishna, Lakshmi, Narayana, or Sita, Rama, especially, or any other form of Lord like Nrsimha, Varaha, Gauranitai, Matsya, Kurma, Shaligram, Shila, and many other forms of Vishnu like Trivikrama, Keshava, Achyutya, Vasudeva, Narayana, and Damodara, as recommended in the Vaishnava Tantras or Puranas. And one's family should worship strictly following the direction and regulations of Archana Vidhi. Any members of the family which is above 12 years of age should be initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. And all the members of the household should be engaged in the daily service of the Lord, beginning from morning 4 a.m. till 10 p.m. by performing Mangala, Aratika, Niranjana, Archana, Puja, Kirtan, Shringara, Bhoga, Vaikali, Sandhya, Aratrika, Patha, Bhoga, Shayana, Aratika, etc. Engagement in such worship of the deity under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master will greatly help the householder to purify his very existence and make rapid progress in spiritual knowledge. Simply theoretical book knowledge is not sufficient for a neophyte devotee. Book knowledge is theoretical, whereas the archana process is practical. Spiritual knowledge must be developed by a combination of theoretical and practical knowledge, and that is the guaranteed way for attainment of spiritual perfection. The training of devotion service for a neophyte devotee completely depends on the expert spiritual master who knows how to lead his disciple to make gradual progress towards the path back home, back to Godhead. One should not become a pseudo-spiritual master as a matter of business to meet one's family's expenditures. One must be an expert spiritual master to deliver the disciple from the clutches of impending death. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has defined the bona fide qualities of a spiritual master, and one of the verses in that description reads, Shri Vigrahara Dhana Nityanana Shringaratan Mandiramarjanado Yuktasya Bhaktangs Channinjatopi Vande Gurho Shri Charanaravindam. Shri attention engaged in the service of the Lord, especially in dressing and decorating the temple, accompanied by musical kirtan and spiritual instructions from scriptures, can save the common man from the hellish cinema attractions and rubbish sex songs broadcasted everywhere by radios. If one is unable to maintain a temple at home, he should go to another's temple, where all the above performances are regularly executed. Visiting the temple of a devotee and looking at the profusely decorated form of the Lord, well dressed in a well decorated, sanctified temple, naturally infuses the mundane mind with a spiritual inspiration. People should visit holy places like Vrindavan, where such temples and worship of the deity are specifically maintained. Formerly, all the rich men, like kings and rich merchants, constructed such temples under the direction of an expert devotee of the Lord, like the 6 Goswamis. And it is the duty of a common man to take advantage of these temples and festivals observed in the holy places of pilgrimage by following in the footsteps of great devotees. Anuvraja. One should not visit all these sanctified pilgrim places and temples with sightseeing in mind, but one should go to such temples and sanctified places immortalized by the transcendental pastimes of the Lord and be guided by proper men who know the science. This is called Anuvraja. Anu means to follow. It is therefore best to follow the instructions of this bona fide spiritual master, even in visiting temples and holy places of pilgrimage. One who does not move in that way is as good as a standing tree condemned by the Lord not to move. The moving tendency of the human being is misused by visiting places for sightseeing. The best purpose of such traveling tendencies could be fulfilled by visiting holy places established by greater acharyas and thereby not being misled by the atheistic propaganda of money-making men who have no knowledge of spiritual matter. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shigrive Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadam Mayam Dadati Swabatandikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri-Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragnatan Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivashakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishavanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Panchakalpatarvescha Kripa Sindhu Bhyayavacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vikasa Swami Nityaname Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityaname Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharne Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jnananandamayam Devam Nirmashpatikakritim Adaram Sarva Vidyanam Hayagrivam Upasmahe. Okay, so continuing the discussion. Sorry, I'm just trying to bring up the text here again. 3:22. On the 3rd chapter, now in the section of quite a heavy section where Shukadeva Goswami is starting to really, in the last couple of verses we've seen, is very heavy set of verses, really chastising the materialists, or really putting really giving them the stick here, really kind of pointing out their useless existence in this world by their endeavor for this material world, that endeavor for the Baira Arthamanina, that which is external to the body. So we are seeing here that this set of verses particularly refers to those who are materialists. Of course, it's inspiring for those who are on the path of spiritual knowledge also, but specifically it's trying to awaken that desire to desire to serve Krishna within their heart by pointing out their faults. So Shukadeva Goswami does a very nice job here, and specifically he is calling out, like I was saying, the materialists who are particularly absorbed in the aham mama bhava, that bhava, that embodiment, or that recognition of oneself to be aham mama, I am the doer of everything. So Prabhupada is very expert in this purport. Immediately he says the householder. He says immediately, he says especially for the householder devotee. Yes, everybody's engaged, like he quotes, but especially for the householder devotee. Why for the householder devotee?
Because there's so many identifications in relation to the body.
If you're listening to this, Guru Maharaj gave that class here. in the first or the second part. He mentions this. This is from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prakriti Rasha Shata Dushani. He says that Aham mama bhava satve nama kabur hayena bhoga buddhi na chadile aprakrita hayena. The holy name never appears to those who are conditioned to think in terms of I and mine. The stage of transcendence cannot be reached if such enjoying attitude is not abandoned. So Guru Maharaj makes the point, and a point in general the Bhagavata makes, is I, me and mine is the basis of material existence, and that base is on sex attraction. So that basis of I, me and mine is completely coming from this attraction to the opposite sex, and that becomes expanded in the form of, from this attachment, this springs from from the male and the attraction between male and female. This furthers one's manifestation of home, family, children, name, fame, adoration. All these things come from there. So this aham mama bhava is prominent in family life. One starts to see himself as the proprietor. One starts to see himself as the protector. One starts to see himself as the person who is the object of love of others, right? The family, the wife, the kids. We all come. We've been in some sort of family life in our lifetime, or we've seen it. Generally, the wife is dependent on the husband, and so the wife is naturally soft and caring to the husband. So when that is there, then naturally one feels like the Purusha bhava. That Purusha bhava becomes very much prominent in family life, because you're the provider of the family, and the wife looks at you upon that, and the way the wife talks to you, and the way the children talk to you, the way you should talk to your children, it's all that Purusha bhava. So one starts to think of himself like this. So therefore the path of deity worship is very strongly recommended. Why? Because Krishna becomes the center of the household. One no longer takes himself to be that aham mama bhava it can be redirected with the understanding that Krishna is the provider of this household. So because this household in the Bhagavatam by Prahlad Maharaj, he describes it as such, as O best of the asuras, king of the demons, as far as I have learned from my spiritual master, any person who has accepted a temporary body and temporary household is certainly embarrassed by anxiety because of having fallen in a dark well where there is no water but only suffering. One should give up that position and go to the forest, Vana. More clearly, one should go to Vrindavan, where only Krishna consciousness is prevalent, and should thus take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this andakupam is word that's used in this verse. Andakupam, that the household life is considered the dark well where there's no water. One is just left to suffer. One is left to just become hungry and thirsty and die. And that's probably one of the worst ways to die. So why? Because there is no, what is this thirst? What is the water that's not there? There is no Krishna Katha. Because we understand there is no these sadhu sangha nama kirtan bhagavad shravan mathura vas shri murtira shraddhaya sevana. This is not available in the householder life, the materialistic householder life. This is not available. There's no water. One is just dying. One is just like the Bhagavatam is describing exactly that. That it is no better than the plumes of a peacock. He's starving. He can't see, actually. He's in a dark well. He can't enjoy. He can't sustain his life. So these 5 things are the angas of bhakti. This sadhu sangha, nama kirtan, bhagavad shravan, mathura vas, shri murtira shraddhaya sevane. So sadhu sangha, what's sadhu sangha? What's nama kirtan? Chanting the holy names. Bhagavad shravan, hearing Bhagavatam. Mathura vas, residing in a holy place. And Shri Murtya Shraddhaya Sevane. Worshipping the deity with faith. Worshipping and veneration with some idea that he's a great Lord that I'm worshipping. So one does that, but the key thing in this 5 angas of bhakti is that sadhu sangha is there. That the rest of the angas of bhakti are attained by sadhu sangha. So one takes direction from the spiritual master, must install, but as far as possible, every householder, by the direction of spiritual master, must install the deity of Vishnu, like the forms of Radha, Krishna, Lakshmi, Narayana, or Sita, Rama, especially, or any other forms of the Lord, like Nrsimha, Varaha, Gauranitai, Matsya, Kurma, Shalagram, Shila, and many other forms of Vishnu, like Trivikrama, Keshava, Achyutya, Vasudeva, Narayana, and Damodara, as recommended in the Vaishnava Tantras and Puranas. And one's family should worship strictly following the directions and regulation of Archana Vidhi. So this is a very important point, that one doesn't just with sentiment take up on a deity. I mean, if you become a little bit more, if you hang around in the Krishna conscious society for a good amount, little bit of time, not even so long, then you start to see all these things. That grihastas, they have deities. Some grihastas have deities, but that deity is completely neglected, and is not just well, it is neglected in some sense, but more than neglection is that the worship is not proper at all. The way of worshipping the deity is not at all following the archana vidhis of that Gopal Bhatta Goswami he recommended. He put down the archana vidhi for the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, those following in the line of Rupa Goswami. He gave certain rules and regulations in order to worship the deity. But if one doesn't understand that and sentimentally installs a deity in his home and starts to worship it, one starts to commit offenses to the deity. He actually, more or less, he actually doesn't have so much faith in the deity, but it is that deity is just there as a show. It's just a show of devotion. Look, I have a deity. I cook for him every now and then and give him some food, give him some boga, and then I take that and I do a little bit of decoration here and there. But the proper mode of worship is not taken up. Often the devotees who worship such deities, they're meant to be Brahman initiated. They're meant to have a thread. They're meant to understand the rules and regulations. They're meant to have the qualities of a Brahmana. So that worship must be taken under the direction of a spiritual master. They should have deities in their homes, but it must be taken permission from a spiritual master, and the spiritual master, he only engages in his disciple in that worship which makes advancement for the disciple. Like if you listen to this lecture in the second part, Guru Maharaj mentions that the spiritual master doesn't give rasa without rati. He doesn't give without attachment. So the spiritual master, he allows one to install a deity in order to enhance that attachment of the disciple to Krishna. But if the disciple is neglectful of the deity and he doesn't understand the rules and regulations and is not willing to understand, if you have a deity, you should understand how to worship it. Just like if you have like a vacuum cleaner, you have to learn how to use it. You can't just press anything and just throw it anywhere. You have to learn how to use it. Or any machine that you may get, or like the Sankirtan machine we get, we have to understand what should be done and what should not be done in order to work the machine. So the deity, there is rules and regulations in order to instructions to worship that deity. It's not just done out of feeling. That's Prakriti Rasha Shata Dushani. This is just material feeling. That's the whole thing of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's book that Guru Maharaj is going through. That it's just material rasa. One is just thinking himself to be on a platform of bhakti, but he's actually just experiencing material rasa. So if one is not careful to worship the deity according to the instructions and the scripture, then it just becomes a nuisance. Then it just becomes I can hear myself. It just becomes or actually over time, that because it's just done out of sentiment, it will become a burden. And so just that's why you see when you go to Nepal, there's no real recognition sometimes of families indeed for their deities. So the shalagram shila is often used to like crack open nuts. You can see this on the streets of Nepal sometimes. The vendors who are selling shalagram, on the side, they may crack open a few nuts and eat them, and so on and so forth, because there's no understanding there. So why is it that this deity is installed? Well, actually, Rupa Goswami, he says something very interesting in this, in particular regard to worshipping the form of the deity. So, my dear friend, if you still have any desire to enjoy the company of our friends within this material world, then don't look upon the form of Krishna who is standing on the bank of Keshighat, a bathing place in Vrindavan. He is known as Govinda, and his eyes are very enchanting. He is playing upon his flute, and on his head there is a peacock feather, and his whole body is illuminated by the moonlight in the sky. So the idea or the understanding Prabhupada gives in his purports is that that this murti, the deity of Krishna or Varaha, or in this mention Lakshmi Narayan, Narasimha, all these Matsya, Kurma, Shaligram, Shila, what are they meant to do? That by worshipping them at home, then he will forget his relationship of so-called friendship, love, and society. This is the duty of every householder, to install deity of the Lord at home and to begin the process of worshipping along with all his family members. This will save everyone from such unwanted activities as going to clubs, cinemas, dancing, parties, smoking, drinking, etc. All such nonsense will be forgotten if one stresses the worship of deity at home. So this is what we're meant to. When a grihastha, he installs his deities in his home, there is meant to be absorption. 4 to 10 p.m., 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's a big work day. It's a long work day. What is that? That's 16 hours? 18 hours? Well, they only sleep from 10 to 4. Yeah, 18 hours. So 18 hours of engagement in the worship of the deity. Prabhupada says that down here, that any member of the family who is above 12 years of age should be initiated by a bona fide spiritual master, and all the members of the household should be engaged in the daily service of the Lord, beginning from morning 4 a.m. till 10 p.m. So the householder is meant to be absorbed in this worship, in devotional service, in going to Mangala Arati, this Nirjana, Archana, Puja, Kirtan, Shringara, dressing the deity, Bhoga, offering Bhoga, Pivamani Sandhya Arati, Patha. Patha is that recitation, Patha, and Bhoga, and then offering at night also. So all these things are meant to be performed, and by doing this, the disciple, he's engaged in that Shri Vigrahara Dhananityanana Shringaratan Mandir Marjanado Yuktasya Bhaktang Shaninjitopi Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vindam. So he's engaged in the service of the spiritual master. This becomes his life in engaging in that particular service, and the spiritual master guides him. So particularly here, Srila Prabhupada is saying that book knowledge is theoretical, whereas the archana process is practical. Spiritual knowledge must be developed by a combination of theoretical and practical knowledge, and that is the guaranteed way of attaining a spiritual perfection. The training of devotional service for a neophyte devotee completely depends on the expert spiritual master who knows how to lead his disciple to make gradual progress towards the path back home, back to Godhead. So just in regards, before I go into some of those things, we were seeing that a level, this archana process is being described, and Prabhupada is saying by performing this archana process that the family becomes purified, and there is no longer a need to go to the cinemas and drink and smoke and do all these things. But actually, I've seen the contrary, that there's the deity in the home, and the whole family is engaged in going to the movies and going to restaurants and parties and such and such. Why is this? Because there's no importance given to the deity. The aham mama bhava hasn't changed. It's just there just because this, the Prabhupada says it on his books, so I'll just keep it there. But there is no real absorption. So when there's no real absorption in the deity, they have to be absorbed in this, they have to be absorbed in something. And so they're absorbed in how to satisfy their senses. Devotees, they're absorbed in how to satisfy their senses. And that's the inherent nature of the conditioned soul. He's always gonna fall to that. He's always gonna fall to that point of, that, what is that? Water always finds its level. That's what one devotee was telling me. That it always finds its ground. That, you always try to see ways in which you can always go to a place where, you're comfortable. So, especially in Grihastha life, there's no one to push you and check every little thing that you're doing, and so the Grihastha, if he's not absorbed in trying to worship the deity, trying to serve the spiritual master in whatever practical way that he can, then he glides to this platform of just watching cinemas and going out, and then the whole family becomes engaged in that. If the leader of the household, he doesn't emphasize the deity worship, then there's no question of the rest of the family being absorbed in that either. The practically speaking, the man, the husband, he becomes the guru of the house, and he's a guru to his wife and his children. So he must develop this attraction and this system to train his rest of his dependents in the process of archana, in the process of absorption in serving Krishna. So we can see that in certain we see the Goswami's caste in Radharaman, that their Prabhupada says that we should take that standard that they have in that temple, and when you go there and you see it, it's quite amazing the way they worship that deity. I think even that now, it's like their descendants are starting to kind of, there's like certain that's remaining, because I know a few, there's like one particular, maybe that's just one guy that I know, but that while I was there, when I was seeing the deities, their worship is going on very nicely, and you also see them. We went and got to take prasadam there, and how they serve, how they've maintained it is quite amazing. It's quite amazing that the family is completely absorbed. You can just, when you sit down and they come and serve you prasadam, you can see that these devotees are quite absorbed in their service to Radharaman. It's quite beautiful actually when you go there. There's always kirtan is always going on. Worship is always going on whenever it's open. This is quite an amazing sight to see, because it's been going through so many generations of family lines. And so one can take example from that. That their training is perfect in worshiping the deity, and that family is remaining absorbed like that. So one is meant to take that instruction of the spiritual master and apply it in his life, and become absorbed in that instruction of worshiping that deity. And if one can't maintain a deity at home, that is also fine. If actually one lives near a temple, it's not recommended to keep a deity, but actually worship the deity in the temple, because there's generally, if there's a deity in the temple, there's enough engagement to keep the grihastha completely absorbed. So if one can't keep a deity in the temple, then he should be absorbed in the deity that is at the temple. And not everyone can do this archana process, that's for sure. Not that everyone can engage in deity worship per se on the altar, but that deity worship is not particularly limited to being on the altar per se. That worship is also done, offering a flower from a distance, observing the Lord from his feet all the way up to his moon-like face, and his turbans and his different flowers and different peacock feathers that he has on his head. So that is also a form of archana. To worship the Lord, you can just come in front of the Lord and just be absorbed in seeing this form of the Lord. That is actually the point, that when one worships the deity, he becomes absorbed in all these beautiful features of the Lord. That he's very careful and very attentive in seeing the Lord. And so when Rupa Goswami is describing this, actually Prabhupada says that it seems like that he's disregarding Krishna and just giving the materialist some room. Because he says, my dear friend, if you want to enjoy, then don't look upon Krishna. He says, don't look upon the Krishna who's standing on the banks of Keshi Ghat. He's known as Govinda. His eyes are very enchanting. He's playing upon his flute, and his head, there's a peacock feather, and his whole body is illuminated by the moonlight. So Prabhupada says the actual import of this verse is that one must see the form of Govinda if one at all wants to forget the nonsense of material, friendship, love, and society. So this is the point, that when one worships a deity, he forgets his aham mama bhava, that I am the proprietor of my family, I'm the provider, I'm the protector, I'm the person who is doing everything. Kartam iti manyate. He forgets this. And he becomes absorbed in serving the Lord. So, Sri Vigraha is the archer or suitable worship form of the Lord, and the disciple should be engaged in worshipping the deity regularly by Shringara, by proper decoration and dressing, and also by Mandira Marjana, matter of cleansing the temple. The spiritual master teaches the neophyte devotee all these kindly and personally to help him gradually in the realization of the transcendental name, quality, form, etc. of the Lord. So there's the dressing of the Lord, there's the worshipping, and then the cleansing of the temple. This is also fits in within the worship of the deity. There's cleaning of the temple, and so anybody can do that. You don't have to have second initiation or anything like that. Anyone can engage in that. Anybody can engage in making garlands and wicks and so many other beautiful paraphernalia for the Lord. So that's a form of archana, that's a form of worship. And so when people come, they can be immediately actually engaged in this service. So Prabhupada goes on. Actually, he also says that when performing this worship, one should not do it with the idea of, one should not become a pseudo-spiritual master as a matter of business to meet one's family's expenditure. One must be an expert spiritual master to deliver the disciple from the clutches of impending death. I mean, I saw in my own family, the guru comes, and he just, he does a few things here and there in order to get his money, and he goes. But he doesn't particularly give knowledge to the disciples to advance in spiritual knowledge, but he encourages and fans this spark of material desire. So this is a pseudo guru. This is a person he's acting as a matter of business to keep one's family expenditure. Because if a guru is there, if he is a real guru, as the Bhagavatam defines, then the guru studies Shastra and he gives what the Shastra says. And we can understand what Srimad Bhagavatam says, that forget all this material, this nonsense, and just only perform bhakti, that is tivrena bhakti yogena, that perform this intense devotional service. So then one becomes a cheating guru if he simply works for, treats the deity as his, or what do you call it? As his, you go to a show and they show you, a trophy or whatever. I mean, it's like an exhibition, and you see it and you pay money and then you go. You see it, now you saw it, and then you go on. It's just a statue, just to see something nice. Just like people go to this, so many national parks in America just to see, okay, I paid money to go into the national park, I saw it, and then I go out. It just becomes a business, and that's like the whole thing with the Hindu society. It's a business. You keep a temple, you keep a deity, they know, the Hindus will come, they'll give you money, and your family, your life is maintained. And unfortunately, our society is pretty much become that. There's only very few centers which don't really go towards that end. There's very few centers that try to keep a pure understanding of what the deity is, why we're worshipping him. I mean, the Hindus will come regardless, but there is a lot of centers in our society are particularly geared towards that. Therefore, when you go to a center and if you see another deity in the temple room that is particularly in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, not bona fide to keep, then you can understand that they're just catering towards the Hindu society. Just the idea of keeping the deity so we'll get money. Our temple will be maintained by just getting this money by this deity. So the deity just becomes, what is he? He's just another material object. Because why? He's the object by which you get paid. Sugar daddy. So it's just whatever, it's just a thing. I mean, one may not have that mentality in the beginning, but it becomes prominent unintentionally. Just the nature of it is that you get, you're thinking about the money more than the deity. The deity is looked at as a money machine. That's the word. It's a money machine. So one should not do this. One should not do this. It is offensive to the deity. It will not awaken that attachment to the Lord, but it will fan that spark of material desire. So this is going on. So one has to be careful in regard with when one keeps a deity, that he does not just keep it as some material object to worship for the sake of gaining some material profit, name, fame, adoration. That's, like I was saying, that's the whole mama bhava, and then the deity becomes a catalyst of that again. So only attention engaged in the service of the Lord, especially in dressing and decorating the temple, accompanied by musical kirtan and spiritual instruction of scriptures, can save the common man from hellish cinema, attraction, and rubbish sex songs broadcast everywhere by radios. If one is unable to maintain a temple at home, he should go to another temple where all the above performances are regularly executed. Visiting the temple of a devotee and looking at the profusely decorated form of the Lord, well dressed in a well-decorated, sanctified temple, naturally infuses the mundane mind with spiritual inspiration. Therefore, when people come, the deity, we keep the temple very clean. We decorate the deity very nicely, because Prabhupada is saying that it infuses the mundane mind with spiritual inspiration. So the temple should always be kept very clean. The deity should be well decorated, well cared for. And so when people come, it's not that, there's in most temples you'll see many places, they'll try to hide the deity, or, maybe close the altar and have your programs, or just don't have the program anywhere near the deity. But Prabhupada is saying that it will infuse their mundane mind with spiritual inspiration. Just by seeing the Lord, when it's beautifully decorated, when it's done by the devotees of the Lord who are unmotivated with messed up the verse. That without any this karma or jnana karmadya anyavritam. There is no desire for that. The devotees are serving the deity with love and affection, decorating them nicely. Temple is kept clean, and so when they come, their mundane mind will be infused with spiritual inspiration. So one should, the deity, when he keeps the deity like that, then just like we've had our own experiences with Nrsimha, that because we've worshipped him and we regard him very deeply within our hearts, when we present people to him, they become infused with inspiration. They want to support the building of this temple. When they see this deity, they want to see this project expand. They become infused to serve the Lord. So in that, some of those lectures, I'm not going to go through my notes, but Guru Maharaj mentions a few things like that. Actually, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, one of his lines is that the holy name, it's just uttered, but the syllables are there, but the name is not there. Krishna is not there. So similarly, if the deity is there, but if there's no love and affection and care of the devotee, if the devotee doesn't have that vision or that awe and reverence of worship, or that attraction to the Lord, to worship him in an unmotivated way, then it just becomes a mundane thing. Just like, he was particularly mentioning that you go to the Bagh Bazaar and or what's the bazaar called in Vrindavan? That's Bagh Bazaar. Loi Bazaar, you go to Loi Bazaar and you purchase a deity. But the deity is not actually there if that intention of the devotee, that consciousness, the Krishna consciousness of the devotee is not, is at least trying not to be, trying to, at least endeavoring to serve the deity without motivation. So people will become naturally inspired by seeing the deity like this. People should visit holy places like Vrindavan, where such temples and worship of deity are specifically maintained. Formerly, all rich men, like kings and rich merchants, constructed temples under the direction of expert devotees of the Lord, like the 6 Goswamis. And it is the duty of the common man to take advantage of these temples and festivals observed in the places of pilgrimage by following in the footsteps of great devotees, Anuvraja. One should not visit all these sanctified pilgrim places and temples with sightseeing in mind, but one must go to such temples and sanctified places immortalized by the transcendental pastimes of the Lord and be guided by proper men who know the science. So again, same thing, just like one views the deity with some mundane mind. If you views places like Vrindavan, Mathura as a place of just to sightsee, then again it's of no use. Actually, Rupa Goswami, he says this, that I remember the Lord standing by the bank of the Yamuna river so beautifully amidst the Kadamba trees, where many birds are chirping in the gardens, and these impressions are always giving me transcendental realization and beauty and bliss. And so Prabhupada says, this feeling about Mathura Mandala and Vrindavan by Rupa Goswami can actually be felt even by non-devotees. The places in 84 square mile district of Mathura are so beautifully situated on the banks of the river Yamuna that anyone who goes there will never want to return to this material world. These statements by Rupa Goswami are factually realized descriptions of Mathura and Vrindavan. All these qualities prove that Mathura and Vrindavan are situated transcendentally. Otherwise, there would be no possibility of invoking our transcendental sentiment in these places. Such transcendental feelings are aroused immediately and without fail after one arrives in Mathura or Vrindavan. So one can experience that I remember that the Lord standing by the banks of the Yamuna river so beautifully amidst the Kadamba trees. Prabhupada is saying here in this purport that one should go to such temples and sanctified places immortalized by the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, and be guided by proper men who know the science. So Rupa Goswami is seeing that by the banks of the Yamuna river, so beautifully amidst of the Kadamba tree, where many birds are chirping in the gardens. And these impressions are always giving me transcendental realization of beauty and bliss. So the banks of the Yamuna river, the many pastimes of the Lord, the Kadamba trees, so many times in the Krishna book and different books of the pastimes of the Lord, this is a very essential, this tree is very prominent in Krishna Leela. And these impressions are always giving me transit. He's seeing that. So when one goes to these places, one should try to have the vision of be immortalized by the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. But have that mindset that this is the abode of the Lord. And that I must be respectful. I must not try to commit offenses. That's why it is recommended generally 3 days in Vrindavan unless one has a specific service to perform there. If you have a service to perform there, that is the order of your spiritual master, then you're very fortunate. But not that. But if one is absorbed in serving the Lord outside of Vrindavan, and he's in his mind, he's always meditating upon Vrindavan, then he is also in Vrindavan. So, not that it's particularly limited to the place itself. Of course, we should visit. That is emphasized in Shastra. But one can always live in Vrindavan. If he is serving the Lord within his heart in this way that is done also in Vrindavan, then he is also residing in Vrindavan. Mathura Vas, this place, a temple, is considered the holy place. It is considered a place of pilgrimage. So we may not be able to go to such holy place immediately, but just coming to the temples, that in this is mentioned, if one's legs are not used to travel to the holy places, if it says The legs which do not move to the holy places. So one utilizes his legs to go to the holy places, to come to the temple, to serve the deity in the temple, to go on book distribution, to dance and chant in kirtan. So this is called anuvraja. Anu means to follow. It is therefore best to follow the instruction of the bona fide spiritual master, even in visiting temples and the holy places of pilgrimage. One who does not move in that way is as good as standing tree condemned by the Lord not to move. The moving tendency of the human being is misused by visiting places for sightseeing. The best purpose of such traveling tendencies could be fulfilled by visiting the holy places established by great acharyas and thereby not being misled by the atheistic propaganda of money-making men who have no knowledge of spiritual matters. So everybody wants to travel. You ask any young man who is 18-year-old, what do you want to do? Or you ask a 16-year-old or 18-year-old, oh, I just want to travel. But they don't realize actually this travel is so it's actually, when you're on it, everywhere you go, you realize it's not worth it. Just like we were traveling to so many places in the summer last year. That was summer, right? That was summer. In the summer last year. And we're seeing so many places and these people look really miserable. And even, traveling around the world, like places like, if you go to places like Sydney, or even another devotee was telling me that Eiffel Tower, it just looks like a big piece of metal. It's not even that interesting. Places like the Opera House, it's actually brown. It's not even white. It's like the birds just pass through over and over again. I don't know why they don't clean it. It's really depressing. You get there and it's like, this is it. This is what everyone's like hyping about. And people are coming from Spain and China, mostly China actually, China and so many different parts, America, to come and just visit in the bottom, down under of the world. So and you just come and see this stupid thing. People just take a picture and walk away. That's as far as it goes. Or even we went to this Moab with this thing. It's just an arch. That's all it is. It's just a big rock that's just arched, and people hike up to there. They spend thousands of dollars just to come to there. And it's like, what the hell is this? We were like, really like, what the hell is the people come here for? Like, we tried to distribute books there in Moab. It was like terrible. It was terrible. It was like the Moab, we did it in the town. So we did it in the town and it was terrible. So, but these places, they're absolutely useless, and it misuses, or the Bhagavatam says one is just like a standing tree. He's as good as him not moving. It doesn't make any progress in any way whatsoever. So the materialists, they're just utilizing this moving tendency of human being is misused by visiting places for sightseeing. The best purpose of such travel tendencies could be fulfilled by visiting the holy places established by great acharyas and thereby not being misled by the atheistic propaganda of money-making who have no knowledge of spiritual matters. So it's a big farce that you should travel and become, you'll become self-realized by traveling. That's like the whole thing about, They'll become like that. That's the whole thing, that when you travel, you'll learn so much and you'll become peaceful at the end of it. But one guy who was on a call was telling me, I have a friend who traveled so much, but he's like he doesn't know what to do with his life now that he's old. He's like 50 years old. And he's been traveled all his life. He went to so many countries, he did so many things, but he's like not happy at all. And so if you actually look at the society, and at least when I was, the Instagram, and I never saw that thing, but Tumblr was like a whole thing, and that you see that all people are traveling so far, and I'm learning so much and doing so much. But actually, the more that they do such travels, the more hankering and lamenting they create for themselves. And so it's just the mental mind going so many places to try to satisfy their lusty desires, but it's not satisfied. So there's no satisfaction there by that travel. Actually, there's no real realization. It's just superficial. So when one goes to the holy places, one becomes, like Prabhupada is saying, by seeing the deity, one becomes infused with spiritual. He's particularly saying here, sorry, I forget exactly, that he says that this mundane is infused with spiritual. What is the word he uses? Does anybody remember? he says, infuse the mundane mind with spiritual inspiration. But when one goes to holy places with proper association, his mind and his whole being becomes infused with spiritual inspiration. He feels inspired. He feels satisfied, and he gets real knowledge, real practical knowledge of how to make progress in devotional service. So when one utilizes his life in serving the Lord in this way by looking upon the Lord, the form of the Lord, the representation of the personality of Godhead, his forms, name, quality, etc. And he uses his legs, he uses his body in visiting such places, in serving the Lord, then his life becomes satisfying, his life becomes perfected. But if not, then they're of no use. They're of absolutely no use. So one should engage in the deity worship of the Lord. One should engage in the Sankirtan movement of the Lord, of Lord Chaitanya, and become completely satisfied by traveling to so many places which are not of pilgrimage, but it's just like we see Tirthakara, or in those set of lectures, that the sadhus create the holy place. So when the sadhus travel in their vans and in their planes, they may travel, whatever they travel in, to all these different places, they sanctify these places and they make them a place of pilgrimage. So those people that are coming to enjoy on the Saturday on the street corner in Miami, but the devotees are there distributing books, now they've entered a place which is of pilgrimage, by which they can receive transcendental knowledge. Then that is the purpose of a pilgrimage, is to go and receive transcendental knowledge. So the devotees, when they travel and they're present in places like Prabhupada, so many tirthas are there. The Atlanta Piedmont Park is a tirtha. The Atlanta Temple is a tirtha. All these places Prabhupada traveled. You go there, and I mean, we see how Piedmont Park is infused with spiritual inspiration for them to take Prabhupada's books. Just by Prabhupada stepping on there, being present there, he satisfies that, he completely purifies that atmosphere of material existence. And so when the devotees are there present again, it's ready, it's ripe to be that those fruits are ripe and to be picked off. So therefore, we're there every day for like almost a year and a half, and we distributed so many books. And so when devotees travel like this, they create these holy places. You know, when one worships the deity like this, even the eyes of the materialist, when they come into the temple and they see, they are infused by spiritual inspiration. So like that, if one can purify his existence in this way, he not only does good for himself, but he does good for everyone else. So I'll end my class there. Is there any questions or comments? Please feel free to ask. Any questions? Mm.
Govinda studying a case she got. One interesting thing with that is that Rupa Goswami, in that section, he gives, I think it's chapter 16 or 17, something like that. Oh no, he's talking about the 5 processes of devotional service, the 5 potent processes. So the point he makes is that these 5 processes in and of themselves can like invoke like ecstatic love of God.
Yeah, that's the next verse after that.
Yeah, and he quotes this verse, and this verse gives evidence to show that like one of the symptoms of an ecstatic love is that he's like, I forget exactly the proper translation, like neglectful of material affairs, basically. He's like, he's unattached to worldly affairs. And so this verse, it shows how, by seeing Govinda, you'll become detached from all your worldly friends. So it shows, it's like giving an example of how can it induce ecstatic love. Another point is it's unrelated to that, but Srila Prabhupada, I read recently Transcendental Diary, there was this group, it was a splinter group, they weren't like, different things, they were like dressing in karmic clothes, they wouldn't wear devotional clothes, they wouldn't distribute books, and they wouldn't worship the deity. And Srila Prabhupada told Burjan Prabhu, who was kind of like loosely associated with him at the time, he said, and if you don't worship the deity, you will never become clean, that's a fact. So I thought that was interesting.
Okay, anything else?
In the purport, Prabhupada was recommending that devotees can worship any form of Lord Krishna, but obviously it was given by Prabhupada. It was recommended, where it was an instruction to worship the form of Krishna, and Radha, Krishna, Gauritai, and we won't see like Lakshmi Narayan and Radha Krishna in the same temple in the society. In the street line, there's Lakshmi Narayan. I don't think you'll see Radha Krishna. Maybe with Lakshmi Narayan within that line. But the question is, you'll see a lot of temples in our society with Sita Ram and Radha Krishna. I was wondering, is that like Rasa Abbas? Like, is that proper to have like Sita Ram and Radha Krishna within?
I mean, the Prabhupada specifically says here that once installed the deity of forms of like Radha Krishna, Lakshmi Narayana, Sitaram especially.
Yeah, but in the same, my question is within the same temple.
It's like saying, asking the question, can you keep Gauritai and Radha Krishna together? I mean, like, there's worshiping, there's Krishna's forms, there's many forms of Krishna.
Yeah.
They're worshiping, Rama. I mean, I don't see the problem. I don't know how it's Rasabhas. I don't know how it contradicts. Like Rasabhas is when the rasas, they don't mix.
Yeah.
What's the problem? It's a form of Vishnu.
I see. Okay, I was just wondering because I don't know. I just thought that was rude. I didn't know if it was proper.
There's no contradiction. I mean, Krishna's there and Rama's there. What's the problem?
Okay.
We worship him all together. We worship him. We have Nrsimha on the altar. Is that Rasabhas?
No.
Nrsimha is a very fierce one. The Krishna is done with. So it's like. It seems.
So it's fine to have to do Radha Krishna's temple.
I don't see the issue.
Okay.
Ramdas Abhiyar Prabhu asked me this question, and I didn't know the answer, of course. But, we worship devotees, like Prabhupada, we worship the topmost devotees of the Lord. So he asked me, why don't we worship Lord Shiva? Because Lord Shiva, isn't he said to be the topmost devotee? Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the question.
Well, we see what Prabhupada says in that, in those purports that we do, but not in the same way that the Shaivites do. Well, Prabhupada doesn't say that second, but Shiva is a great devotee of the Lord. We definitely would take inspiration from him. He's the greatest of all Vaishnavas. So we worship him in the same way that we worship our spiritual master, but not in the sense of that he is the supreme personality of Godhead. There is a distinction made still, that we see the position of Lord Shiva, but we don't particularly put him on the altar. I mean, you'll see that in some temples they have the Shiva lingams. I've seen that, that's wrong. And so, but it's like we won't put him on the altar because that misconception may be there that one may think Shiva, and like we have Nrsimha out there when we think that when they start to think, Shiva is also part of that. Especially Hindus, they have this whole thing that Shiva and Vishnu are the same. And specifically with chanting the holy names, if one thinks like this, forget it.
Yeah.
So, but
Simple. Our Acharyas are greater than the demigods. That's it. Period. Our Acharyas are greater than the demigods. Shiva is a demigod. Our Acharyas are greater than the demigods.
Lord Shiva is the topmost Vaishnava. So.
Let him be, but he's a demigod. Topmost Vaishnava on what platform? This is also analyzed. Topmost Vaishnava, is he greater than the gopis? Never.
He wasn't allowed to enter that.
Are the gopis Vaishnavas?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so there's different aspects of being great.
Yeah, I mean that's how it is.
Very good.
It's relative in the absolute sense. So, but the simple point of why the demigods do not get to be on the altar is because our acharyas are greater than the demigods.
Could you please explain in what way?
Well, first of all, their spiritual position in itself as being devotees of the Lord in Vrindavan that in itself makes them on a higher platform than even the residents of Vaikuntha. Now, from a more general and shastric perspective, this all the parampara and sampradayas will accept, is that the Acharya is the representative of all the demigods. Sarvadeva Maya Guru. So the Acharya is actually to be worshipped greater than that of the demigods. When compared to the demigods, we respect the Acharya a lot more than the demigods. So therefore, from a standard Vaishnava perspective that all sampradayas will accept, you cannot place the demigods along with the acharyas. To think that just because the demigods, Brahma is, that's why we don't, you see, Brahma is also not sampradaya, but the but if you take, there are other devotees up there, for instance, Ganesh, great devotee of Nrsimha. We don't place him on the altar.
Is it because of mixed devotional service? Is that...
No, you're overthinking it here. It's not mixed or unmixed. The point is our acharyas are eternal and personal associates of the Supreme Lord. Whether they are siddhas, they are perfected souls on that platform. Whether they are nitya or sadhaka, they are associates of the Lord. And they are worshippers of Vrindavan, which is a domain that actually the demigods cannot even enter. They have no access. So it's, and yes, in general, demigods have mixed devotional service. But even if, still, for us, the acharyas have come and saved us. Which demigod came and saved us? Srila Prabhupada saved us. Simply for that reason, you will place Srila Prabhupada as more important, deserves more respect than the demigods. Just simply on that reason, that's all. What Shiva, I mean, we want to worship Shiva, we would have been drinking in some brothel. That was the position.
Fasting Shiva as we go to the brothel.
Where was that? We would have not been saved. Our acharyas have saved us. Simply because the fact that the acharya has taken us to the lotus feet of Krishna, he should not be placed on the same platform as the demigods. Even if we know that a particular demigod is a pure devotee, still we will not place, because our acharyas are our acharyas. They are more compassionate upon us than others. So, actually, to place the demigods on the same platform with the acharyas is actually in some way slighting the acharyas.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.